There are a number of neuroscientific findings which indicate particular sorts of brain differences that lead to the various symptoms that those with autism suffer. In looking at various scans of the brain and comparing them to people who do not have autism, those suffering had specific differences in the frontal lobe, as well as specific differences which relate to language and facial processing that are particularly affected. In addition, there are areas in the left hemisphere of the brain which have to do with facial recognition and social cueing that also have differences from those who do not have autism, and explain something about the reason that people with autism have such difficulty in recognizing emotions on people's faces and social cueing from those and therefore relating. This is the downside in terms of autism and struggling with the very particular symptoms. But there is actually an upside in the sense that there are particular strengths that are hardwired to these very specific differences. Strengths, for example, such as increased visual acuity, particularly in peripheral vision, which is connected to this decreased facial recognition. The reason for that may very well be because the areas of strength are actually areas in wiring that are close to or border the areas that have the deficit. Another area of particular strength is the ability to classify objects, which is called increased hypersystemization. And the ability to classify objects can be seen in the symptom, for example, of a fascination with trains and classifying them into different groups of trains of different kinds, and perseverating on that to such a degree that you may be very much a train expert, but also perhaps to the exclusion of other things. But you might also be able to classify objects that have more practical meaning in the world and may relate to one's ability to perform, for example, in the field of technology and computer science remarkably well. People with autism also tend to show an increased drive to analyze or construct systems or patterns of sorts, greater attention to details, and a comfort in repetition and in perseveration. Again, perseveration and attending to minute details can be a symptom of autism if it prevents you from doing other things that you might want to do and might be important to your functioning. But that kind of attention to detail and that kind of comfort in repetition can be a huge strength when it comes to, for example, particular jobs in the technology realm, where it requires one to be able to look at detail over and over again and catch any very tiny mistakes, which someone who does not have autism might have a great deal of difficulty doing. This all lends itself to us as a society really thinking about the ways that the increasing number of adults who are going to be existing with autism might find independence, life satisfaction, and even add greatly to our society's capacity by having them be employed in areas where they actually might be more talented and in fact possess greater strengths attuned to those particular areas.